guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole, and in today's video I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up. Now, the month of January was a really great reading month for me. I was able to read 9 books. The majority of them were audio, but nonetheless I'm very glad with the 9 books that I read. My ratings were pretty much I have a couple 1 stars, a couple 5 stars. I'm not a very harsh rater, but some of the books that I read this year were just had me confused, so I had to give them 1 star. The first book I read this month was Gemina by Amie Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. Now this is this is a tome. This is the sequel to Illuminae, and I read Illuminae in December of last year. This is the first book I picked up this year, and it started off my year in the best way possible. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a great sequel. I thought it carried the story perfectly. I love how the main characters from Illuminae, they are in this book, but they're not just mentioned. They're not side characters. They actually have a role to play in this book. The main heroine, Hannah Donnelly, from this book has become my all-time favorite protagonist. She's kick-ass. She cares so much about other people. I love the relationship between her and Nicholas, which is the love interest. I also love the relationship between Nick and his cousin Ella. I just thought this was perfect. The title fits this book perfectly. I love this book from beginning to end. I didn't have any hard time jumping back into the story. I thought everything was well crafted. I love the way Amie and Jay write together, and I cannot wait for Obsidio. I'm so excited for it. I want to see how this story wraps up because holy crap, so much happens in these books, and they are so action-packed. I love them. The month of January, reading-wise, was my sci-fi reading month. The majority of the books that I read were sci-fi. So the next 2 books that I listened to were sci-fi. One of them was YA sci-fi, the other one was adult sci-fi. The first one that I listened to was These Broken Stars by Amie Kaufman and Megan Spooner. I read this because they were coming on tour to my city for Unearthed. They were doing the Unearthed tour, so they came. So I wanted to read a book before I met them. I gave this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. I liked it. I didn't love it. I'm not going to continue on with the series. I like the characters. Overall, I just think this book wrapped up. It started and it ended, and it felt like a standalone. I was perfectly fine reading it as a standalone. It's about these 2 characters, and they're pretty much star-crossed lovers in space. A lot of people compare this to Titanic in space, and I can totally see the resemblance. It pretty much is Titanic in space, but what I really love that a lot of people don't mention is the survival aspect to the story. I enjoyed it. It was perfectly done. The main character, Lilac, she starts off, as a snobby little bratty girl, but she progresses. Her character arc is pretty incredible to read about. Not a lot of authors can do that, so I really enjoyed that. I, however, did not like the alien aspect to this, and I know a lot of people did enjoy it. I didn't like it. It just wasn't my cup of tea, so I will not be continuing with the series, but it was a 3.5, so it wasn't terrible, but it just wasn't for me. The next book I read was Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This is part of the Southern Reach trilogy, and Annihilation is actually being turned into a movie. It comes out in February by the producer of Ex Machina. That pretty much sold me to read this book. When I saw that it was becoming a movie by the producer of Ex Machina, I was like, I want to read this before I see the film. This book, it's hard to explain. It's a hard book to understand. I gave it 1.5 stars. Honestly, I was just lost throughout the entire story. It follows these 4 women that go into this place called Area X. Area X is pretty much this piece of land somewhere off the border of Florida, and it's protected by this thing called the Shimmer. So these 4 women go in there. It's sort of like a expedition. They're trying to find out why it's there, what created it, if there's any life form in there. And because it is expanding, so eventually it will take over all of Earth. But honestly, I read this book and I cannot tell you anything about it. I was confused pretty much the entire time. I do like the ending, however, so I mean, it's kind of like a 2-star for me. I did like the ending, and the writing style I really enjoyed, but overall I was confused with the setting. I was confused with the storytelling. I like the writing but not the storytelling. I don't know if that makes sense. It makes sense to me. But I was just confused. I gave this book 1.5 stars because I was confused the majority of the time. Another trilogy which I will not be continuing because I'm not going to waste my time trying to understand something. I will watch the movie, however, because, as I said, the producer of Ex Machina, Natalie Portman, Oscar Isaac, I am thrilled. It is a February movie, so it might not be the best, but nonetheless, I'm still going to watch it. The next book that I read warms my heart. This book warms my spirit. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. Extremely well deserved. It is Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. It took me forever to pick this book up. This book came out, I believe, in 2014 or 2015. Let me double check. Yeah, this book came out in 2015. It's 2018. It was time I read it. This book, 5 out of 5 stars, deserved every single one of them. If you don't know what this book is about, it is about Simon, and he pretty much gets blackmailed by someone who is gonna out him in his school because he is gay. So they're gonna out him in his school if something doesn't happen. So you pretty much follow Simon's story, not only Simon's story, but like Simon and his group of friends, and it's just like blackmailing is, you know, not the best, not the funniest or happiest topic to tackle, but Becky Albertalli did such a great job with the story. Every time I think of Simon or I think of this story, I'm just so happy. Like, I get fuzzy feelings, if that's correct, adequately put. I get fuzzy feelings when I think of this book. I know this is the book that I'm gonna reread. I don't know what else to say. This book is great. I think everyone should read it. It's such a good and important book to read, especially nowadays. But like I was saying, you can definitely tell that Becky Albertalli was a child psychologist because she just writes these teenage characters in such an honest, raw way that you can't help but fall in love with them and fall in love with their relationships and everything that they go through. You really just feel for them. So following that 5-star book, I read another 5-star book, completely different than Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, as that one is YA contemporary love story. This is adult sci-fi, but holy cow, another 5 out of 5 stars. This was a really good reading month for me. That book is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Number 1, this cover is gorgeous. Number 2, this book is gorgeous, incredibly written, beautiful. This follows the story of Jason Destin, who is a science professor at a university, and one day he gets, I want to say kidnapped, but that is the wrong term for this. He basically gets kidnapped and then he wakes up the same life, a very similar life to the one that he led in his old life, and stuff happens and it is intense, it is action-paced, it will mess with your mind. That is the one thing that I knew before I started reading this book. I prefer to read books knowing pretty much nothing about them. So the only thing I knew about this book was that it will mess with your mind. People really liked it. So, you know, I was like, okay, let me give this book a chance. I listened to this on audio as well. And within the first 2 chapters, I was hooked, immediately hooked. It's such a gripping writing style that you need to keep on reading. You need to know what's going to happen to this character. And Jason, the main character, he just goes through so many trials and tribulations that at the end, you can't help but root for him. You want a happy ending for him. This book, it is sci-fi, but it has like a subtle love story woven through it, like through the entire book. And I really love that because I am a romance fanatic, so I really love that. I by no means am pursuing a science major, nor am I great at science, but the way that the author explains, you know, like quantum mechanics and catatonic state in this book made me feel smart. Like, I understood what he was saying. I also love how the author doesn't like tell you everything, and how the main character Jason doesn't automatically like realize everything. All of a sudden he's like, oh, this and this and that. Jason, you know, he realizes what is happening like towards the middle of the book, and like he said, he writes it in such a way that you feel comfortable reading about it. It's not like info dumpy where you're like, whoa, what is happening? The thing that happens in this book, you're like, whoa, that could never happen. But the way it is written, the way it is explained, makes you think like, wow, like that could happen in the near future. So another 5 out of 5 stars. If you have not read this book, I highly recommend it. I by no means love reading adult sci-fi. This is adult sci-fi, not very heavy like sci-fi opera, but it is adult sci-fi, and I enjoyed the heck out of this book. The next book I read was another adult sci-fi, another book that I highly rated. It was a 4.5, not a 5, but still close enough. It is Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. So this is the first book in the trilogy The Themis Files, with the last one, Only Human, coming out later this year. This book follows a girl who, when she's younger, she falls down this hole, and she falls into this giant robotic hand. Fast forward a couple years and she has become a scientist, and she clearly states in the book that she did not become a scientist because of the arm that she fell into, but she was just always interested. It follows her and a couple more characters that are introduced into it as they try to piece together this mysterious giant robot that first they found the hand, and then they start finding different parts of this robot, around the world. This book did start a little bit slow for me, so it was like 50 pages before I really got invested into the story. It is told in all interviews, so everything is interviews, and you don't know who the interviewer is, but I really enjoyed him as a character because he's so smart. He's always a step ahead, and you know, he's kind of like that in the gray between area where you don't know if he's completely good, you don't know if he's really bad, but I really enjoyed him as a character. And though it is told all in interviews, I connected so much with all the characters, especially the female pilot. I'm forgetting her name, but I really connected with her. I love how they travel to so many different places in this book. I love all the political aspects that are interwoven in this story. It's not only a sci-fi book, but you know, it has political aspects, it has relationships, it has romance, it has twists and turns. This book is just a roller coaster of a book. Like, one second, you know, people say like, oh, this book will take you in this direction and then change directions. This book, honestly, I had no idea where it was going. Every single time that I turned the page, I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen. I'm not convinced that this character died. I'm not convinced that this really happened, because it has so many different plot twists. It was a great book to start off a series because it gives you answers to a lot of the questions that are proposed in the beginning of the book, but it still leaves you wanting more, so you want to pick up the next book. As a matter of fact, I just got accepted to check out the second book, Waking Gods, and I'm so excited to read it because I just don't trust authors killing characters anymore, because you can never, you know, if it's sci-fi or fantasy, never truly believe that a character is dead until you see their body. 4.5 out of 5 stars. Definitely recommend it. Another adult sci-fi that I thought this is not my genre, but apparently I've been reading a lot of adult sci-fi and I've been enjoying them, so I will definitely pick up more in the future. The next book that I read was in one of the 4 books that I had to read in 2018, and I've been wanting to read this ever since the film came out, and I believe it was 2014 or 2015. I did watch the movie before I read the book, and I've actually watched the movie like 6 times before I decided to pick up the book, and I'm so happy that I finally picked it up. It is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. Now, this book, either you really like it or you kind of hate it. I loved it. I loved every second of it. I don't know how this author, Gillian Flynn, how she can perfectly craft and make these characters so like you hate these characters, but like at the end of the day, like I was rooting for Nick. It follows, if you don't know, it follows the story of this man named Nick Dunn, and one morning, on the morning of his and his wife's 5th anniversary, his wife disappears, and for the beginning of the book you have no idea where she's at, and all the clues are pretty much leading to him being the #1 suspect. They know him having had killed her, but holy cow, holy moly, plot twist. And not only one plot twist, multiple plot twists. The ending did upset me a little bit, but I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars because I enjoyed the entire story. There was a couple of slut-shaming parts that I didn't really like, but I kind of understood, but she didn't have to go to that extent. Nick and the relationship between Nick and his sister Margot, I loved it. The film did take out some of the scenes that are in this book, but those scenes weren't really necessary, so I'm fine with the adaptation. I actually love the adaptation. So yeah, 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in January was an absolute delight. This book was wonderful. It is My Lady Jane by 3 authors, Cynthia Han, Brody Ashton, and Jodi Medes. But you really can't tell like where one author picks up and where the other one starts writing. It follows Lady Jane Grey, and it took me a while to pick up this book as well because I was never really interested in it. But as a person who loves history, I don't know what I was thinking when I refused to pick this book up. This book is just so much fun. It reminds me of like the feeling that I get when I think of Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda. Just happiness and like hilarious. This book is hilarious. I love the fantasy aspect that is put in this story. I love all of the characters. I love the narrator. I listened to this on audio as well, and highly recommend this on audio. The narrator is just incredible. So it follows Lady Jane Grey, and if you don't know, in actual history, she was killed within 9 days of being queen. But this book throws history out the window pretty much. This book was just a really great time. I give it 5 stars, and I know they have another book coming out and it follows Jane Eyre, so I'm definitely gonna be picking that up because this one was great. It was so funny. It had so much romance and I just really enjoyed it. Nothing was taken too seriously, and the topics that would have been taken seriously had like a fun comedic twist to them. And the last book that I read this month was another adult sci-fi horror, pretty, you know, like blends the lines between those two genres, and it is I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. Now, I also watched the movie before I read this book. The only thing that this novel and this movie share is pretty much the title. That is it. The movie follows this man named Robert, and he lives in an apocalyptic world where humanity has completely ceased to exist, and the villains, the monsters that come out in the movie, they're pretty much like zombies, but in the novel they are definitely vampires. 100% they're vampires. It also follows Robert Neville, and he is the lone survivor of this terrible plague that took a toll on Earth. He's the only survivor, and he lives in California. The movie takes place in New York. I'm not a fan of that adaptation, even though I did watch the movie before and afterwards I read the book. I prefer the book. It really makes you feel this like complete solace and isolation, which I think is hard to write that and to get the reader to feel like that. But you read about this man. He wakes up every day, you know, he has his 2 cups of coffee, his breakfast, and then he just roams the city during the day only, because at night all the vampires come out. And so you follow him and what he does on a daily basis, and it jumps back from like before the plague started, you know, after the plague started, and you pretty much just follow him, and you just feel for him. And the ending was sad. Like at the end I felt sad after finishing this book, because he struggles so much to wanting to find a cure for this plague. I give it a 3.5, which is not a terrible rating. It's not a great rating, but I overall enjoyed this book. I would recommend it if you like apocalyptic stories of like lone survivors. So that's it, guys. Those are the 9 books that I read this month. January was a great reading month. I read some incredible books and I read some not so good books, but overall I had a blast this month. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!